Tonight, bracing for a blast, risk of more explosions at a chemical plant triggered by the floods in Texas. Also dramatic new rescues in a major pipeline shuttered by the storm. How high will gas prices go? Diplomatic war, a surprise move as the U.S. retaliates against Russia. What's just been ordered from New York to San Francisco. Caught on camera, outrage over what an officer is heard saying during a traffic stop.
Remember, we only kill black people. Yeah, we only kill black people, right? All the videos you've seen, have you seen white people get killed? You have.
Tonight, the department responds, and bogus bank accounts, a growing scandal at Wells Fargo. Customers on the hook for accounts they didn't want and charges they didn't even know they owed. Are you one of them? Nightly News begins right now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening and thank you for being here tonight as the remnants of Hurricane Harvey finally exit the state of Texas and rescue crews intensify their search for victims. There is a new pressing danger in the flood zone tonight. A chemical plant burning. It's already been rocked by 2 explosions early today after critical cooling systems failed in the flood. A large area around that plant in Crosby, Texas has been evacuated in anticipation of more explosions amid uncertainty about the safety of the air around it. Jacob Rascone is leading off our coverage tonight. Jacob, good evening.
Lester, good evening. Tonight, the sheriffs and fire department, the National Guard, even the EPA are working overtime, hoping to avoid another crisis. Nobody is allowed to enter the evacuation zone in what is now a high-stakes waiting game. Tonight, the flooded Arkema chemical plant is still smoldering. Neighborhoods within a mile and a half urged to evacuate, as officials warn that more explosions are possible.
These things can burn very quickly and very violently, and it would not be unusual for them to explode.
Today, the Whitley family, already dealing with flood damage in their home, headed for Grandma's house.
Sound like a big bomb to me.
You gotta get out of here.
Yeah, so.
The Arkema plant handles organic peroxides used to make plastics, pharmaceuticals, and paint. The chemicals have to be refrigerated or they can decompose spontaneously and sometimes explosively. Harvey's fury knocked out the facility's power and 2 backup generators. This morning, one of 9 large containers storing the chemicals erupted in flames. The others could soon follow. Officials scrambled to reassure the public that an air analysis for health dangers showed no cause for alarm. But at least one expert who studied Houston's chemical plants extensively says organic peroxides can be unstable and toxic.
Worst case scenario would be that if the runaway reaction deteriorates into an explosion.
Across Greater Houston, there are 2,500 chemical plants and other facilities. So far, no serious threats have been reported at any other plant. Back in Crosby, for families like the Whitleys, staying is not worth the risk.
I don't want to be sitting at the hospital, and his little lungs just can't even handle it,
Jacob Rascone, NBC News, Crosby, Texas.
I'm Miguel Almaguer. In Beaumont, a state of emergency is taking on new urgency.
The sickest ones will go first.
At a hospital, those already in need are being rushed out. Surrounded by water, this hospital has no clean water. The place people turn to for help, now whisking them away.
She's a dialysis patient, and they don't have any water here to dialyze us.
Nursing homes across the area, like this one in Port Arthur, evacuated. Nearly 3,000 residents from more than 100 long-term care facilities have been saved. A prayer for help answered. So many have lost so much, and it's unclear how many are still missing. Rescuers continue to go door to door and are on rooftops, breaking into homes where people may be trapped. Yesterday, we were there when D'Amica Singleton and her family were hoisted to safety.
Please, somebody, go get my mama out of there.
They did.
I thought I was going to die. I really thought I was going to drown. Everything in my house was floating.
68-year-old Ella Bradley was brought to this shelter hours away from her daughter.
My granddaughter called, and I told her, I said, I won't make it, baby. I said, I don't think I'm going to make it. She said, Grandma, don't say that.
That's my mama.
Like so many families, they're waiting to be reunited.
I want to talk to her. I want to make sure she's okay.
Back in Houston, floodwaters blanket much of the city. But where the water is receding, the scope of the devastation is now being revealed.
If you stop, you'll just cry, you know? So you just keep moving forward.
The Wadlers returned to their home this afternoon.
We're here and all alive and together, and these are just our possessions.
Across the region, an estimated 100,000 homes have been damaged. 32,000 people remain in shelters, and 25,000 have been rescued. And now more trouble for those trying to get out of town. Long lines at the pump as supply crunch drives up gas prices in Texas. A major pipeline that stretches to New Jersey and provides 40% of the East Coast fuel has been cut off. But the real loss is measured one family at a time through stories of heartbreak and survival.
With President Trump planning to visit Houston on Saturday, his second visit to Texas since this storm, the official death toll stands at 32. But first responders say when they check neighborhoods like this one, that number could definitely rise. Lester?
All right, Miguel Almaguer tonight, thank you. And meantime, as so many people want to help, there is controversy swirling around one of the biggest charities of all, the Red Cross. There are critics raising questions about transparency and about how the money you give is spent. Let's get more on that now from NBC's Kristen Dahlgren.
When disaster strikes, Americans have come to expect donation campaigns by the American Red Cross.
Please donate now to help people affected by Hurricane Harvey.
But now there is a campaign against the massive aid organization. Hundreds of tweets like, "Don't give Red Cross your money." Very little, if any, goes to those that need it. The criticism mounting after a Red Cross executive interviewed on NPR couldn't say how much would go to Texans.
You don't know what proportion of the total amount is that relief?
No, I really don't.
In 2014, an NPR and ProPublica investigation found the Red Cross misstated how money is spent. After the devastating earthquake in Haiti, a report by Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley found 1/4 of Red Cross donations went to administrative costs.
The Red Cross should be responsible to make sure they're very transparent.
The Red Cross disputes the critical reports and today promised 91 cents of every dollar would go to victims.
We are going to make sure that this money is spent to help people with food, with shelter, with water.
The watchdog group Charity Watch gives the Red Cross a B+ overall.
They can do the heavy lifting at the scale that community organizations and churches and some of the other nonprofits are not going to be able to offer.
According to the Red Cross, it has already served more than 250,000 meals in Texas and opened over 240 shelters.
You want a blanket while you're sleeping?
A charity in the midst of providing disaster relief, now fighting a different kind of storm. Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News, New York.
Let's turn now to the growing fraud scandal at one of the nation's largest banks. Wells Fargo today admitting that well over 1 million more fake accounts may have been opened in customers' names than it initially disclosed last year. The total now, 3.5 million. So how do you know if you're one of the victims? We get more from NBC's Ann Thompson.
The wrong kinds of numbers keep adding up for Wells Fargo. Another 1.4 million accounts opened without customers' permission, bringing the total to 3.5 million. Fraud that the bank now says went on for 7 years, from 2009 to September 2016. To meet quotas, Wells Fargo employees were pressured to open the phony accounts, victimizing consumers and small businesses with fake checking, savings, credit card accounts, and unsecured lines of credit, racking up fees for the bank and potentially ruining customers' credit.
Out-of-state purchases, foreign purchases, vendors who I can't make heads or tails out of.
It's been 2 years of frustration for David McKee, who says Wells Fargo used his information to open 3 bogus accounts.
My wife and I have done our best, and we've been responsible. It's drained our savings account.
McKee says Wells Fargo called last night checking back on his claim, promising an answer in 10 days.
You probably wouldn't have known if Wells Fargo opened an account without your permission in your name. You'll probably be informed by Wells Fargo that that happened, and any fees that you incurred will be returned to you.
Legendary investor Warren Buffett, CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, Wells Fargo's largest shareholder, says the bank is fixing its problems, but wasn't surprised more fraud was found.
What you find is there's never just one cockroach in the kitchen.
Today, Wells Fargo CEO Tim Sloan apologized, saying the first priority is to make things right for customers. A balance sheet that, in the minds of many, remains very much in the red. Ann Thompson, NBC News.
Now to a big show of force as the U.S. and South Korea respond to North Korea's latest missile launch by issuing a clear message to Kim Jong-un about the firepower he could face. Our chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has details tonight from South Korea.
Today was America's turn to flex its muscles to Kim Jong-un. A senior U.S. military official tells NBC News the American and South Korean warplanes that buzzed over South Korea flew close enough to the border that they were visible inside North Korea before veering off to drop bombs on a South Korean range. The aircraft took off from Japan and Guam and are among the most sophisticated in the U.S. arsenal. 2 B-1B bombers, 4 F-35 fighter jets. And the U.S. isn't just showing it can fight from the air. Today, American Marines were honing their skills in live fire exercises. U.S. forces in South Korea are always on a state of high alert. These Marines came from their post in Japan to work with South Korean forces and familiarize themselves with the very terrain where they might have to fight against North Korea.
I think we're a little more focused just because of current events, but we're always focused. I mean, that's our job, and that's why we're here.
Here to train day and night, guiding Apache attack helicopters as they fire on simulated North Korean targets.
This is building readiness right here. This is ensuring that if we get the call, these guys can put steel on target to protect ground forces, and that's the bottom line.
The U.S. military making it clear to North Korea it's ready. U.S. military officials tell us they do not expect Kim Jong-un to back down after this, that it's now a game of one-upsmanship, with the next move likely to come from North Korea. Lester?
Richard Engel in Seoul. Richard, thanks. The U.S. is getting new payback against Russia over its meddling in the 2016 election. Today, Russia was ordered to shut down 3 diplomatic sites within the U.S., a move that prompted one Russian official to warn of an escalating diplomatic war. Our Peter Alexander has the latest.
Tonight, the U.S. retaliating against Russia, ordering the closure of 3 diplomatic offices in San Francisco, New York, and Washington within 48 hours. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson informing Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in a phone call today. The decision coming from the president himself.
We've taken a firm and measured action in response to Russia's unfortunate decision earlier this year.
That decision from Vladimir Putin last month, responding to new U.S. sanctions for Moscow's interfering in the election by expelling 755 American diplomats. President Trump at the time expressing gratitude.
I want to thank him because we're trying to cut down on payroll.
White House aides later dismissing that as a joke. Today's action not kicking out Russian diplomats, but closing 2 trade mission annexes and the San Francisco Consulate General, the oldest Russian consulate in the U.S. And a prominent Russian lawmaker tonight insisting the U.S. is declaring the hot phase of diplomatic war.
The Trump administration had to respond. This was the right decision, regrettable but necessary.
Also tonight, NBC News has learned former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort's notes typed on a phone from that controversial Trump Tower meeting with Russians during the 2016 campaign included a reference to political donations and RNC, according to sources briefed on the evidence. Investigators are now reviewing those notes, trying to determine if there was any talk of foreign donations to the Trump campaign or the Republican Party, contributions that would be illegal. Manafort spokesman telling NBC News the suggestion is 100% false. Peter Alexander, NBC News, the White House.
There's a lot more to tell you about tonight. Still ahead of police officers' shocking words caught on camera, the racial remarks he's heard making during a traffic stop, and the action the police force is now taking over it. Also remembering Diana, how the people's princess still captivates 20 years after her tragic death.